After James passed last spring, I sold the old house and moved closer to Ben and Emily. Just outside Asheville, in a smaller place where the hills are soft and the pines lean like they're listening. They had 3 children, a busy household, and I thought, well, maybe I could help. I offered gently. Pickups, drop-offs, a casserole here, a load of laundry there. Emily always smiled, cordial, brisk, but rarely said yes. I stayed available anyway. Just in case. Sometimes I'd show up early with a basket of muffins. Sometimes I'd wait outside the school even if they didn't ask me to. I folded towels without being told. Rearranged the spice rack, thinking it might be helpful. One evening, after Luke's parent-teacher night, I returned to drop off a forgotten backpack. I heard them through the hallway vent, just faint enough to stop me in place. She means well, Emily said, but we don't need a 4th parent in this house. Ben didn't answer right away. Then a tired sigh. Floorboards creaked. Someone shifted their weight. She's just lonely, he said. Then quiet. No defense. No warmth. I stood there with that backpack in my hand, something small and forgotten, just like me. I didn't knock. I didn't go in. Instead, I walked back to my car and sat there until the porch light clicked off. I didn't cry. But something in me folded. Neatly. Quietly. I'd always believed family was worth every effort, every second, every dollar. I still do. But that night I began to wonder if belief alone could hold a shape when no one else wanted to carry it. The next morning, I watered my porch plants early. The frost was light. The rosemary looked like it was trying to bloom despite the chill. I stood in my slippers and watched the sky pinken slowly over the ridge, whispering to myself that maybe things would settle. Maybe it was just a phase. But deep down, I knew. Something had shifted. Not with anger. Not with noise. Just the gentle undoing of a knot that had once held everything together. The next few weeks didn't break me, they chipped at me. At first, it was small things. Emily stopped mentioning the kids' recitals. One afternoon, I found out from a neighbor that the school had hosted a family potluck. I had baked banana bread that day, hoping they'd come by. But they were already home with paper plates and plastic forks stacked in the trash. I started watching the family calendar on the fridge, where my name used to be written under Nana pickup or Sunday lunch with Mom. It disappeared, quietly. One day I was Mom, then Nana, then no one. I tried not to take it to heart. Sometimes Ben forgot to respond to my texts. Other times, he'd answer hours later with a one-word reply, busy or later. Emily once replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That one made me sit down. Dinner was where I noticed it most. I'd bring over shepherd's pie or homemade soup, leave it on the counter while they were still out. When they came back, they'd have takeout containers and apologies that sounded tired. Oh, we forgot you were cooking. Emily would pat my shoulder. It's fine. We'll freeze it. No one ever asked how it turned out. I began cooking smaller portions. The kids, well, they were still kind, in the distracted way children are. Luke, the eldest, sometimes remembered to hug me goodbye. Sarah was always in headphones. The little one, Jamie, once thanked me for folding his laundry but added, "Mom says you don't have to do that anymore." I smiled and said I didn't mind. But I started folding fewer socks. The worst moments weren't the ones they knew about. They were the ones they didn't even notice. Like the time I was on the porch with Emily's friend Michelle, who had come by to drop something off. I waved. Emily didn't introduce me. Michelle looked confused, then polite. I said I was just staying close by. It was easier. Later that day, Emily was on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't see me walk in. Her voice was casual. It's like having a ghost in the house. She just floats around. I stopped. She turned, startled, but I didn't flinch. I walked past her to refill the kettle. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look ashamed. Just quiet. That night, I sat in bed with my tea and tried to remember the last time someone asked me how I was doing. Really asked. Not out of politeness. Not as a formality. The silence in the house had become familiar. Not peaceful silence. A colder kind, the kind where doors close softly but purposefully, where smiles don't quite reach the eyes. Where your absence is easier than your presence. Sometimes I'd hear Emily remind the kids to say thank you. That stung more than if they'd forgotten altogether. I told myself to be patient. To stay useful. To stay kind. I'd read once that aging felt like being slowly erased. I hadn't understood it then. Now I did. One day, I tried to schedule a weekend lunch with Ben. Just the two of us. We used to do that, after James passed, especially. He was always quieter than me, but he'd listen. He glanced at his phone, then said, "Emily and I already have plans." That was all. No counteroffer. No later date. Just a decline. I nodded. Pretended it was fine. That evening, I baked a small apple tart and brought it over. I didn't stay. I left it with Luke, who thanked me absent-mindedly while tapping away on his game. 2 days later, I found the tart, untouched, still in its foil, in their outside trash bin. Not even unwrapped. I looked at the crimped edges of the crust, still golden. I had pinched them carefully with my fingers, the way James used to like. I didn't cry. But I went home and sat on my porch, watching the empty road, and let my tea grow cold. No one called to ask how I was. No one noticed I stopped coming by as often. At church, someone asked how the grandkids were. I said fine. I didn't elaborate. When Emily's mother came to visit the following week, I wasn't invited to dinner. I saw them through the window, laughing, setting out wine glasses. Later, Ben texted, "Hope you don't mind. It was just family tonight." Just family. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. That Sunday, I skipped our usual visit. No one called. And that was the answer, wasn't it? I was no longer necessary. Not really missed. Only noticed when I overstepped, or forgot to stay invisible. The funny thing is, I hadn't changed. Not really. But their view of me had. I wasn't a mother or a helper. Not anymore. I was a fixture. A faded photo on the wall. Someone to manage, not include. And the more I stayed silent, the easier it became for them to ignore me. Thanksgiving has always been mine. James and I used to spend weeks planning it. He'd polish the silver, I'd make lists on the back of old envelopes. Even after he passed, I kept the tradition alive. 3 kinds of pie. Handwritten place cards. Cranberry sauce the old-fashioned way, not from a can. This year, I wanted to do something special. I booked a small lodge in the mountains just north of Asheville. Quiet, cozy, a place with wooden beams and soft lamps that reminded me of the cabins we used to take the kids to when Ben was little. It wasn't cheap, but I used some of the insurance money James had left. He would have approved. I didn't tell them right away. I waited until the reservation was confirmed, the pies were planned, the fireplace logs scheduled for delivery. Then I called. "Thanksgiving's on me this year," I told Ben. I'd booked a beautiful lodge. Just us. You, Emily, the kids. It'll be quiet. Homemade everything. I'll take care of it all. Ben sounded distracted. He said that sounded nice. I told him I'd send details. He said okay. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the phone rang. Emily. Her voice was clipped. "We won't be coming," she said. I waited. The kids need a change of scenery. We've booked something in Charleston instead. Ben agrees. I almost asked if he was there, if I could speak to him directly. But I didn't. I thanked her for letting me know. She hung up before I could say more. I sat very still in the kitchen. The butter was softening on the counter. My recipe cards were stacked by the toaster. The sweet potatoes had already been peeled. I should have expected it. But some part of me still hadn't believed they would. I didn't cancel the reservation. I packed my pie tins, my cardigan, and the cloth napkins I'd planned to bring. I drove up the mountain alone. Checked into the suite I had imagined us laughing in. Lit the candles anyway. At dinner, I sat at a corner table while two couples from Florida clinked glasses nearby. They were kind, invited me to sit. I declined politely. Said I was waiting for someone. I wasn't, of course. Later that evening, I walked out onto the lodge's porch, wrapped in my husband's old coat. The wind was sharp. I watched the trees sway like they were shaking something loose. It was then that I allowed myself to ask it, quietly, like a confession. When did I become optional? Back at home, I didn't reach out. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't beg for a rain check. Instead, I began taking stock. I went through my closet. Packed slowly. My hands were calm, methodical. I folded each sweater with the care of someone saying goodbye. 2 days later, I signed a short-term lease on a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a view of the park. Quiet neighbors. No expectations. I didn't tell anyone. I spent the next week removing my name from joint accounts, utilities, subscriptions, anything I had once set up to help them manage their household. I scanned paperwork. I gathered receipts. I called the lawyer James and I had used years ago. Mr. Garrison was still practicing, still sharp as ever. I'd like to update my will, I told him. He paused. I've been waiting for this call, he said. I didn't understand. He invited me to his office that Friday. When I arrived, he greeted me like an old friend. Then he handed me a large envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, sealed with a label in James's handwriting. In case they turn on you, it read. My throat tightened. I sat down slowly. Inside were documents. Bank statements I hadn't seen before. Copies of checks written in your name but never shown to me. Small withdrawals, building over time. Enough to raise questions. And something else. A trust document. Executed by James shortly before his passing. It listed every major asset, our savings, the cabin by the lake, the investment accounts. All placed in my name. With a stipulation. If I were declared mentally unfit or deceased, the estate would bypass Ben entirely and pass directly to our grandson, Luke. Not to Emily. Not to the other children. Just to Luke. I sat there holding the papers like they were warm. Mr. Garrison cleared his throat. James was a practical man, he said. He didn't want you to be cornered. That night, I sat in my new apartment with a single lamp on. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just felt still. Like I had been holding my breath for years without knowing it. And now, I was finally exhaling. After that night, everything moved slowly. Not because I was sad. Not exactly. Because when something in you goes quiet, truly quiet, it takes time to learn how to live without the noise. I didn't tell Ben or Emily I'd moved. I simply stopped being there. I let the absence speak louder than I ever had. At first, there were no questions. No calls. No messages. Just the steady silence of people who had already made room for your disappearance. I learned how to make tea for one again. I bought smaller groceries. A single apple, a pint of milk. I cooked in silence. Cleaned my counters. Opened the windows just enough to hear the birds. The apartment was plain, white walls, beige carpet, but the quiet suited me. There was a small armchair by the window where I sat with my knitting or sometimes just stared at the bare branches outside. No one interrupted me. No one asked what I was doing. And I realized something: I didn't miss the noise of their lives. I missed who I had been inside it. That week, I changed every password I had. Banking, email, streaming accounts, each one reset to something only I could remember. I created a new folder labeled personal, printed new copies of my will, and slid them into a fresh envelope with my name in tidy block letters. I also began sorting old photos. One evening, I took down the framed family portrait that used to hang in my living room. It showed all of us on the front porch 3 summers ago, Ben holding the youngest, Emily in a white hat, me in the corner. Smiling, of course. Always smiling. I stared at it a long time before wrapping it in newspaper and placing it in a box marked archive. The next morning, I mailed a simple card to Luke. No explanation. Just a short note. I've moved. When you're ready, I'll be here. That was it. No mention of Emily. No talk of money or holidays or what had happened. Just space. Just invitation. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. In that time, I found new routines. I started walking the trail behind the grocery store, early in the morning when no one else was around. I signed up for a community quilting group and brought a bag of scraps I'd saved over the years. I sat quietly, listened more than I spoke. No one asked who I was. Just if I needed thread. I also began volunteering at the town library. Simple work, reshelving books, tidying the reading room. The head librarian, a soft-voiced woman named Caroline, said they were happy to have me. No forms to fill, just a handshake and a welcome. It was strange, how easy it was to rebuild something with people who expected nothing from you. Then one afternoon, a knock came. Not at my door. At the library. It was Luke. He looked older than I remembered. Shoulders slightly slouched, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. He didn't say much. Just looked at me and said, "I got your note." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We sat down at one of the children's tables, low chairs and a table sticky with old glue, and talked. About nothing at first. Then about everything. He told me what he'd overheard. How Emily had said I was losing focus, that it might be better for everyone if they stepped in to help with my finances. They were planning something, he said quietly. They just didn't think I'd understand. I nodded. I already knew. Luke looked at me, eyes brimming with guilt. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "You don't need to be," I said, my voice steady. "You listened." That was the beginning of something new. He started visiting once a week. We didn't call it a routine, but it became one. He'd bring small things, a book he thought I'd like, a bag of apples from the market, once a bundle of daisies wrapped in newspaper. We never talked about Ben and Emily. We didn't need to. The silence around them was heavy enough. In the background, I continued to tie up loose ends. I contacted the investment firm James had used. Confirmed the details of the trust. Updated beneficiary information. Everything pointed away from Ben now. Everything went through Luke. I signed the forms without shaking. I also wrote a letter, sealed, dated, and stored in my personal folder. A letter to Ben. Not to send, just to write. In it, I told him the truth. That I had watched him grow into someone I didn't recognize. That I had waited, for years, for him to see me not just as a helper, but as a person. That I had asked for so little, but even that had been too much. And that I forgave him. Not because he deserved it. But because I didn't want to carry the weight anymore. One evening, near the end of December, I walked past their old neighborhood. The lights were up. Garlands on the windows. Inflatable snowmen on the lawn. I stood across the street, just for a moment. The house looked the same. But nothing inside was mine anymore. I turned and walked home, slower than before, but lighter. In the quiet of my new apartment, I made a cup of tea and pulled a blanket over my lap. Outside, the first snow was falling, soft and soundless. I didn't need to be asked back. I wasn't waiting anymore. It was early December when I stepped into Mr. Garrison's office again, the air outside sharp with frost, my fingers cold even through gloves. The receptionist smiled, offered tea. I declined. Mr. Garrison hadn't aged much since James and I used to sit in this same chair, signing papers we didn't entirely understand but trusted him to explain. This time, he looked at me with something closer to recognition. "You were always the one keeping the pieces together," he said. "But James knew. He left you this." He pulled a box from the cabinet, metal, small, heavy with years. The kind of box that looks ordinary until it's not. I opened the lid and found the envelope again, the one marked in James's clean, slanted handwriting. "In case they turn on you." But there was more now. A file I hadn't opened yet. I slid it out carefully. Inside were notarized statements. Recordings on labeled USBs. Copies of joint purchases Ben had made, furniture, tech, even travel expenses, run through my accounts without a word. James had gathered them quietly. "This was all his," Mr. Garrison said. "He asked me to keep it sealed until you came to me, not for defense. For clarity." I nodded slowly. Not angry. Not surprised. Just confirmed. At the bottom of the file was a document I hadn't seen before. An updated will. Dated 5 months before James passed. Every asset listed. Every clause spelled out. Everything in my name. The house. The savings. The cabin we'd inherited from my aunt up near Boone. And the trust, detailed in full. If anything happened to me, illness, accident, death, Ben would receive nothing. Everything would pass to Luke, structured to release over time. A safeguard, James had written. A gesture of trust in the one who still listened. I signed a new power of attorney that day, one Mr. Garrison drafted with care. It gave Luke quiet authority to act only if I became unable. It did not involve Ben. Not now. Not ever. After I left the office, I walked home slowly. The street was slick with ice, but I didn't hurry. I watched the lights in the shop windows flicker on one by one. A dress shop. A barber. A bakery. The world was preparing for Christmas. But in me, something else was taking shape. That night, I packed the last of what I had left in their house, my old sewing machine, a small box of books, a ceramic mug James gave me our first winter together. I made no announcement. No farewell. I simply returned the key. I slid it into a small envelope and tucked it under the flower pot by their back door. No note. No explanations. 2 days later, Emily showed up at my apartment. She wore a wool coat too thin for the weather, her hair tied back like it had been a rough morning. She held a container of cookies. "Snickerdoodles," she said, smiling like it mattered. "Your favorite, right?" I invited her in. Not out of warmth, out of politeness. She sat. Looked around. Took in the plainness of the room. The absence of family photos. "It's quiet here," she said. I nodded. "We were just overwhelmed," she added. "This year's been a lot." I didn't respond. She offered the cookies. I didn't touch them. Then she said it. "We miss you. Ben especially. The kids ask about you." I looked at her evenly. "Did they ask about Thanksgiving?" She blinked. "That was a mistake." "No," I said softly. "It was a decision." She didn't speak after that. When she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. She paused in the hallway, looked at me like she wanted to say something else. But all she managed was, "Maybe we could start over." I shook my head. "I'm not a reset button, Emily." And I closed the door gently behind her. 2 days later, Ben called. His voice was lighter. He joked at first. Said Emily told him I was getting sassy. Then he asked if I could help with the kids during their winter break. Said Emily was applying for a new job and could use the support. And there's this thing, he added. A surprise medical bill. Just for a scan. Nothing major. But insurance is being weird. He trailed off. I can pay you back, he said quickly. I'm just a little tight right now. I asked how much. 15, he said. Maybe 17, depending. I didn't answer. I asked about Luke. There was a pause. He's been distant, Ben said. Probably just college stress. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'll think about it, I said. Thanks for calling. That night, Luke knocked. No warning. Just a quiet knock at my door. He looked shaken. She told me everything, he said. They were going to try and have you declared. He stopped. I put a hand on his arm. It's all right. No, it's not, he said. They were going to take everything. I led him inside. Poured him tea. We didn't say much after that. Just sat in the quiet. The kind that doesn't sting. The kind that stays. The morning after Luke's visit, I found myself watching the kettle boil longer than usual. The steam curled like thread, slow and rising. I didn't rush it. I had nothing urgent to do. No one to tend to but myself. It felt unfamiliar. Later that afternoon, I walked to the bank. Quietly. Without telling anyone. I met with my advisor, a man who had worked with James and me for years but never quite remembered my name without checking the folder. He remembered it this time. We sat in the corner office, sunlight slanting across the desk. I handed him the signed documents from Mr. Garrison. He reviewed them carefully, then nodded. This puts everything under your full control, he said. No joint oversight. No outside access. I smiled faintly. That's the idea. By the time I left, all recurring transfers to Ben's accounts were frozen. The emergency fund Emily used for her so-called professional development was revoked. The college contributions they assumed would keep arriving paused indefinitely. I didn't make announcements. I didn't leave clues. I simply stopped feeding the mouth that never thanked me. 3 days later, Emily returned. She came in a flurry, coat half-buttoned, phone in hand. She didn't sit this time. I got a call from the insurance broker, she said. They said you've revoked the payment authorization for the kids' dental plan. I nodded. I have. Her jaw clenched. But why? They need that coverage. We can't afford the premiums right now. You'll find a way, I said softly. You said you wanted to support their future. And I have, I replied. But my future matters too. She stood there a moment longer, trying to recalibrate. Then she said the word that betrayed everything. You owe us. I didn't flinch. I simply turned, walked to the small roll-top desk in the corner, and took out a single sheet of paper. A printed copy of the trust amendment James had prepared. I slid it across the table. Read this, I said. She picked it up, eyes scanning the lines. This skips Ben? I nodded. And everything goes to Luke? Another nod. She stared at the paper like it was an insult. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Then, finally, you're punishing us. No, I said calmly. I'm preserving myself. She left without slamming the door. I give her credit for that. The next day, Ben called. I didn't pick up. He called again. Then he texted, we need to talk. Then again, you can't just cut us off. Then, the kids miss you. I stared at the messages. All of them missing one word. Sorry. He didn't call Luke. He didn't come by. He simply sat in the mess of his own making and hoped I'd tidy it. That Sunday, I sat with Luke on a bench near the lake. The wind was low. Leaves skittered across the path like they were in a hurry. I don't know what to say to them anymore, he said. You don't have to say anything, I replied. I used to think they were good people, he said. I looked at him. They may be. But they stopped being good to me. He nodded slowly, as if trying to shift a weight from one shoulder to the other. A week later, I got a letter. Not typed. Not emailed. A real letter. In Ben's handwriting. 4 pages. The first page was stiff. Polite. Lots of rationalizing. It's been a hard year. We've felt overwhelmed. We didn't realize how our actions were affecting you. The second page dipped into memory. A fishing trip when he was 9. How I'd stayed up all night sewing his costume for the school play. My apple tarts. Page 3 carried the weight. I guess I thought you'd always be there, he wrote. That you'd keep saying yes. That I could lean on you forever. The final page was shorter. I see now what I did. I don't blame you for protecting what's yours. But if there's any part of you that still wants to be in our lives, we're here. No signature. Just, Ben. I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it in my desk drawer beside the trust papers. I didn't reply. Because apologies spoken in scarcity aren't apologies. They're negotiations. And I was no longer someone to negotiate with. 2 days later, a realtor called me, said he'd received an inquiry about the cabin in Boone. Asked if I was interested in selling. Said the call had come from someone claiming to be managing the estate. I told him I was the estate. He apologized. I had the locks changed the next morning. Luke and I drove up the next weekend. Just us. The cabin needed dusting, but the view was as we remembered, trees like old hands reaching to the sky, lake below still and secret. We sat on the porch, sipping cider, wrapped in blankets. This feels like a good place, he said. I nodded. I might stay a while. We didn't speak of Ben or Emily after that. The air didn't need them. That winter, they tried one more time. A Christmas card. Photographed, printed, their smiling faces in front of a tree too big for the room. Glitter script read, "Love makes a family." Inside, "We miss you. The door is always open. No return address." I placed it in the fireplace. Watched the edges curl. I didn't burn it out of anger. I burned it to clear the air. They came in person this time. It was a rainy Tuesday in late January. The kind of cold that settles in your bones, even with the heater running. I had just set a kettle to boil when I saw their car pull up. Not Ben's truck. Emily's SUV. Black, polished, too large for the quiet street. I didn't move to the window. Just waited. The knock came, polite, almost uncertain. Then again, firmer. I opened the door slowly. Ben looked older. Or maybe just more tired. Emily stood behind him, clutching a small tray covered in foil. "Hi, Mom," Ben said. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside without speaking. Emily offered the tray. "Snickerdoodles," she said, like it was a peace treaty. We remembered. I didn't reach for it. They sat on the sofa, side by side like students waiting to be called on. I remained in the armchair. Ben spoke first. "We've been thinking about everything. A lot." Emily nodded. "We know we hurt you." I waited. Ben glanced down, then back at me. "We want to make it right." Emily added, "Your family. That still matters." They went on like that, soft words, damp eyes, voices carefully measured. They spoke of memories. Old birthdays. The year we built the playhouse. How much the kids missed me. I listened. And when they paused, I leaned forward. Not harsh. Not cruel. Just steady. "You didn't just forget Thanksgiving," I said. "You forgot who I am." Ben's face fell. I stood, walked to the desk, and retrieved a folder. Inside, the final trust document. James's signature still visible. The updated will. The bank statements. The amended ownership records for the cabin. I slid it across the coffee table. Emily reached for it, but Ben stopped her. "You've made changes," he said flatly. "Yes," I said. He stared at the top page. "Everything's to Luke." "Yes." "No one else?" "No one else." Emily shifted in her seat. "But we're your family." I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. Ben looked up again. "So this is it? You're cutting us off?" I thought for a moment, then said, "No." Their faces flickered with hope. "I'm cutting myself free." That hope vanished. They sat there in silence. Then Emily stood. "You've changed," she said, not quite looking at me. "No," I replied. "I've remembered." Ben rose, slower. He looked at the photos on my shelf, none of them recent. None of them from their house. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. I walked them to the door. Not with coldness. With finality. Emily stepped out first, pulling her coat tighter. Ben lingered. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I know. I just didn't know how to stop asking." That was the problem. He nodded, almost to himself. "Tell the kids I'm well," I said. And then I closed the door. It clicked softly. Not like a slam. Like a seal. Inside, the air felt lighter. I placed the untouched tray of cookies in the fridge. I didn't throw them away. But I didn't plan to eat them either. That evening, Luke came by. I told him what happened. He didn't say much. Just sat with me, reading quietly while the fire crackled low. After an hour, he looked up and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. Better than okay. Because I had said no. Without rage. Without performance. Just no. And it had been enough. The days that followed were simple. No drama. No sudden knocks. No flurries of texts trying to reverse what had already been done. Just quiet. It was late winter, and the air outside had softened. The last of the frost clung to the edges of car windows in the morning, but by afternoon, you could almost smell spring pushing underneath. I filled my time with small routines. Every morning, I woke early, made a single cup of coffee, and opened the curtains to let the light in. I began learning how to sit with myself, without expectation. It's a strange thing, peace. Not loud like joy. Not bright like triumph. It's soft. Unfolding. Like fabric that's been in storage too long, finally shaken loose and laid flat. Twice a week, I volunteered at the town library. Shelving books, organizing reading lists, sometimes helping a shy child find their next chapter book. No one there asked where I had been, or who I used to be. I was just Sylvia. A name badge, a warm sweater, a quiet smile. I joined a quilting group. Met in the church basement every Thursday afternoon. The women were kind, not nosy. They spoke more with their hands than their mouths. We stitched together blocks of color, fragments of memory. I began my own quilt, simple, pale blues and muted grays. Luke visited most Sundays. No set time, but always there. He'd bring groceries sometimes, or just his homework. We didn't talk about his parents. We didn't have to. One Sunday, we made soup together. Lentils and carrots, a little rosemary from the window pot. He chopped slowly, like he didn't want the afternoon to end. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace, no TV, no distractions. Just the steady crackle of wood and the sound of our breathing. He looked at me, that soft way he does when he's about to say something real. "I think they're trying to pretend everything's normal again," he said. "They mentioned you the other night. Like you're just busy." I sipped my tea. Let them. You don't want to go back, do you? I shook my head. Some doors don't need reopening. He nodded. Said nothing more. But I could see the relief in his shoulders. It's strange how people talk about healing like it's dramatic. Like it comes in a wave. But for me, it came in smaller ways. A well-made bed. Warm socks from the dryer. The click of the library cart's wheels. At the grocery store, no one rushed me. At the coffee shop, the barista remembered my order, half decaf, 2 sugars, just enough cream. I started learning the names of the ducks that gathered near the lake at dusk. One with a bent wing. Another with a patch of white at the neck. Life had narrowed. But it had deepened, too. No one called asking for help. No one asked what I could give. No one needed me for anything other than who I was in that moment. And for the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted by the quiet. I was restored by it. Ben and Emily didn't come by again. No letters. No more baked apologies. I think they finally understood. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. My silence for surrender. But silence, in the right hands, is structure. It's boundary. It's choice. One afternoon in March, I found myself folding laundry while music played low on the radio. Sunlight streaked across the floor. My hands moved slowly over each towel, each shirt. I paused as I folded the last one. It was a sweatshirt. Luke's. Left behind by accident. I didn't rush to return it. I placed it on the back of the chair by the fire, where it could wait for him. Where it belonged. I sat down beside it, picked up my book, and listened to the wind moving through the trees outside. No one needed me to fix anything. No one asked for more than I was willing to give. I didn't feel erased. I felt held. Not by people. But by my own small life, carefully chosen. By my hands. By my breath. By the soft, steady rhythm of a life that no longer bled for others. Last Thursday, the email arrived. No subject line. Just a name I hadn't seen in months. Emily. I almost deleted it without opening, thinking it was another promotion or some forwarded school flyer from when my email was still on their mailing list. But something made me click. It opened with Dear Sylvia, like we hadn't shared decades, holidays, school plays, last-minute pickups. The tone was gentle. Measured. It read like a letter written and rewritten half a dozen times. We've been thinking about you, she wrote. The kids ask. Ben's been quiet lately. She mentioned the weather. The blooming of daffodils around their front walk. Jamie lost another tooth. Sarah got a part in the spring musical. Then, toward the end, came the plea, soft but unmistakable. It's time, don't you think? Time to talk. To heal. I read it twice. Closed the tab. Didn't reply. The next day, a text from Ben. Short. The kids miss you. Come by sometime. No punctuation. As though that mattered. I set the phone down gently on the table and went to the window. Outside, the lake was still. The ducks were clustered in their usual spot near the reeds. They had names now. I'd given them names, quietly, just for myself. There was Henry, with the bent wing. Martha, who waddled faster than she should. And Pearl, white-feathered and always slightly behind the rest. They didn't need anything from me. They didn't demand. They just showed up. And that was enough. Later that evening, I walked to the market for milk and a bit of honey. The woman at the register, June, asked if I was still quilting. I said yes. We smiled. When I returned, Luke was waiting by the porch. He stood, hands in pockets, eyes quiet but sure. They texted me too, he said. Said we should bring you home. I didn't ask what he told them. I didn't need to. We sat on the steps, the kind of silence between us that wasn't avoidance, but trust. They think time fixes things, I said after a while. They think you've softened. I nodded. He looked at me. Have you? I shook my head. No, I said. I've clarified. That night, I lit a candle by the fireplace. Not for ceremony. Not for memory. Just for warmth. I let it burn until the wax curled in on itself. I thought of the email again. It's time, she'd said. As if the pain had an expiration. As if love was a thing that could be pressed flat and rewrapped. But what they wanted wasn't healing. It was comfort. A smoothing over. A re-entry without reckoning. And I would not be the cushion anymore. Let them explain my absence however they like. Let them tell the neighbors I'm still grieving, or just tired, or taking time. Let them decorate that silence with all the justifications they need. It no longer concerns me. I am not theirs to explain. There is a kind of peace in not replying. In refusing to narrate your own departure. Some exits don't need a speech. They just need distance. A few days later, another envelope arrived. No return address. The handwriting was Ben's. Inside, a photograph. One I hadn't seen in years, Jamie's second birthday. Me holding the cake, Ben beside me, Emily off to the side. I looked tired. But I was smiling. No note. Just the image. A memory pressed flat. I placed it in the drawer with the others. Not out of sentiment. Out of completion. That chapter was written. This one, this quiet, slow one with folded linens and early mornings, is not about loss. It's about clarity. About breath. About a life no longer measured by what others take from it. Yesterday, I walked down to the lake just after sunrise. The path was still damp with dew, and the early light touched the water like silk. I stood by the edge for a long time, wrapped in my coat, watching the wind stir the surface. A few ducks floated near the reeds, quiet, unhurried. Pearl was there, as always, a little behind the others. The bench was cold, but I sat anyway. In my pocket was a letter I'd written weeks ago, and signed, undated. A letter I never planned to send. Just thoughts I needed to pull out of myself and place somewhere else. I unfolded it and read it again. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was just honest. It said, I was never asking for everything. Only to be seen. Only to be valued in something other than service. It said, you didn't break me all at once. You wore me down in increments. Smiles that didn't reach your eyes. Dinner skipped. Memories rewritten without me. And at the end, it said, I'm still here. But not for you. Not anymore. I folded it again and slipped it back into my pocket. A breeze passed over the lake, and the trees whispered something I couldn't quite catch. But it didn't matter. I didn't need their message. I already knew. I walked home slowly. Past the bakery, the post office, the quilting shop. People nodded. One woman waved. None of them knew my story. They didn't have to. At home, I boiled water for tea. Set one place at the table. A single cup. A single napkin folded just so. I didn't feel alone. I felt intact. The phone buzzed once, then again. I didn't look. Just turned it over, face down. The sound of the wind outside was enough. The whistle of the kettle, the creak of the floor beneath my feet. I stood by the window and looked out at the line of trees behind the building. Beyond them, the ridge. Beyond that, who knows? And I thought. They needed me most when I stopped needing them. Not out of spite. Not out of vengeance. But because my presence had become their comfort, not my own. And now? Now I live in a space of my own choosing. Not a house built on obligation, but a home held together by choice. A small place with soft corners and quiet mornings. A place where I can hear myself think. Where I can remember who I was before I was needed. Who I am now that I am free.